You're listening to the Bear in Mind podcast, episode number 48.
A podcast uncovering identity, color, and love, where driving yourself crazy is totally sane and curable. Now your host, T-Bias.
Growing up, I was always that kid that was picked last. Like I went to school in the U.S., and so in gym class, I would pick to make teams. Somebody would pick somebody, and then I was always the kid that was picked last. And I wanted to do an episode about this because I recently felt like I was chosen last, and it was very intense feeling. I had a lot of negative emotions about it, and I realized the intensity is often due to because it's been something that we've been believing about ourselves probably since early childhood all the way throughout adulthood, and then we've kind of taken on this belief. So when it happens, it can feel really triggering. And yeah, so I wouldn't say all the time, but most of the time I was the kid picked last. And I also felt this really acutely in my relationship with my parents growing up, is that it never seemed that they chose me first to spend time with me and things like that. Now, when you're a kid, you kind of create that story in your head, and then you kind of choose to believe that about yourself into adulthood. And so I chose to believe this about myself, that people don't choose me. And of course, when I was believing this, I would look for all sorts of evidence that it's true. And so this happened recently, and in a class I'm in, so with a bunch of classmates, and we have to do these small group projects together, and we are paired up. So somebody in the group organizes the pairs, and we switch off each week. And so I was paired up with somebody, and then I said, hey, let's work together. We have to finish up this project together, this assignment together. And they had already gone and done this with somebody else. So they hadn't followed the schedule. And I was like, okay, now I have to go find someone else to go finish this assignment. And I was angry because I was like, now I need to go find a way to go do this assignment. And the other reason why is that, I was deeply hurt because it had brought up so much of that feeling of always being an afterthought, that no one kind of says, hey, T, I'm going to work with you and let's do this. It's so acute. And like I said, I spent my whole life searching for evidence of it. And anytime I'm in group situations, I notice that it's not like I'm always invited first. Like a group of people always kind of make plans and like, oh, T, by the way, do you want to come to this? It's kind of always, I always perceived it as like I was this afterthought. Like the core group got together and then I was always thought of later, or I was always called up by my friends if there was nothing else going on. And of course, I can recognize today that I'm creating a really big story about being picked last, but it really feels like that, especially when you believe it. And that's why it can be so intense, because you truly believe it about yourself. And because this recent event had kind of stirred up some of these really old ways of thinking and kind of my beliefs about me, I had like this moment when I was angry. I was like, well, this seems very familiar to me. Like I'm again chosen last, and I again went through all of these scenarios from my recent past of how this has to be true and this has got to be true. And somewhere I kind of caught myself and I said, I noticed I was like searching for past evidence to support this belief that I am the person that's picked last. But here's the most interesting thing about that. Even if it is true that I am an afterthought with some of my friends in some groups, even if it is true that people call me up when they have no other plans and I'm an afterthought, things like that, even if it is true and that is what is going inside my friends' heads at the time, it really is about not them choosing me as an afterthought, but about how I choose myself. Now, it doesn't seem so obvious that I'm not really choosing myself first. But that is the case, because choosing myself first means honoring what's going on with me. So when this happened recently, I realized I could be okay. I had these negative thoughts about myself, and I had a lot of negative emotions. Anger was one of them, but there were a lot more underneath it, some kind of sadness and maybe a little bit of shame inside there. And choosing me is allowing for those emotions and not judging myself for having some of these negative emotions. Because before, I would say how I'd handle it is I would judge myself greatly, because I would turn it into, I'm not a really great friend. I'm not as cool as maybe other people. And I would turn this around, and that is the opposite of choosing me, because I'm actually, in that moment, rejecting me. I'm saying, oh my God, I'm not good enough. And all of those thoughts that we have, like, yeah, I'm not capable. I'm not good enough. They'll never like me. And so then when I end up saying those things to myself, I'm rejecting myself. I'm not choosing me. I'm not choosing me. I'm not choosing to love me in that moment. And so this was the first time I actually paused kind of these negative emotions inside me and said, hey, wait a minute, what's happening? Because I felt like kind of overflooded with a lot of negative emotion. And so one of the things I decided to do was accept that I was just feeling this and not judge myself for feeling like this. And I wanted to give myself unconditional love. I wanted it so badly in that moment that I realized that I could have it. I could give myself that love in that moment of feeling like I was chosen last by my classmate and she went with somebody else to go do the assignment. And that I'm okay. There's nothing wrong with me in how I'm showing up in my class. There's absolutely nothing, quote unquote, how there's something right to do or wrong to do. There was none of that. There was just the mind drama. And even though I could recognize I was creating a lot of mind drama, I did not scold myself or berate myself or judge myself for even having this mind drama that I'd carried over from childhood. Because I used to say, oh my God, I know this is from my childhood, and this is reminiscent of how my parents were, how some of my school friends were, et cetera, et cetera. I could have gone down this really negative path. And I decided to pick me first. I decided to say, you know what? I'm going to give myself that love. I'm going to choose myself. I'm going to put myself first, not first meaning before anyone else, but equal to everyone else, and say that I'm okay and there's nothing wrong with me. And this isn't even about me being picked last. This is about some stuff that my mind is coming up with because of past experiences, and that's what it knows how to do. And this time I'm going to do something a little different. And that's what makes it so hard to choose yourself, to put yourself first, because it's one of the most uncomfortable things that you will ever do. If for all of your life up until now, you have berated yourself, felt like you were chosen last, and someone didn't show you that consideration or whatever you were thinking about it as. It was so amazingly uncomfortable because I so badly wanted to throw myself a pity party. And I am very good, by the way, at throwing myself a pity party. I'm talking about 2 days in bed, TV, and the good chocolate. I am really good at it. And even though it was uncomfortable, I wanted to choose myself first. I wanted to give myself that unconditional love, that even if it's true that somebody is picking you last, even if it's true that you're an afterthought, that really is about them, and that has nothing to do with you and how lovable you are, how lovable I am in that moment. Because when you don't choose yourself first, you're basically doing the same thing that all those other people are doing. I'm going to wrap it up here, and I'll check back with you next week.
Thanks for listening. Listen for a new episode next Tuesday by subscribing on your favorite podcast platform. Bye for now.